Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We're going to have a great show. We have a good friend of mine, Keith Blanchard, coming on to talk about what do you love? I feel like singing every time I say that phrase. What do you love? And probably you're all going, no, stop singing, but I'm sorry, it just slipped out. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the services and products I offer. That's soulhealer.com. And if you're interested in having a session with me, whether it be a medical intuition evaluation, clairvoyant reading, or getting some energy work done, they all can be done from your home. So you do not need to live in Texas or in the Dallas area to work with me, which is a very cool thing. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's appliedergeticsinstitute.com. And please do check out the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com, where you can keep informed of who's coming up on the show week to week. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter that will send you the same information and remind you of who that week's guest is. You can also access our over 5 years' worth of excellent programming at the Just Energy Radio webpage. So let me tell you a little bit about Keith and get him on the air so we can find out what I love, or maybe what he loves, or maybe what you love. Best-selling author and composer Keith Blanchard was born on November 30th, 1963 in Houma, Louisiana, and had a typical middle-class Catholic upbringing. In his early teens, he often entertained himself by pondering the big questions about God and the universe. Little did he know that the day would come when those questions would form the spiritual foundation which he would build the rest of his life. So please welcome, and I have a bunch of webpages from the Llano Center of Light, or the divineprinciple.us, or dowhatyoulove.themovie.com. Keith Blanchard. Hey, Keith.
Hi. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm just sitting here cooking shrimp jambalaya for supper, which is one thing I love doing is cooking, and being from South Louisiana, that's in my blood to cook such dishes. Spending time with my boy and outdoors cleaning, just enjoying the lovely warm weather we're having here in Memphis, Tennessee.
So no gumbo?
That was last week.
Oh, okay. That was my experience of New Orleans. How many places can you go and have gumbo, and then rate them all?
And how was it? Did you find the spot?
We found the spot, and it was surprisingly in this Italian restaurant that had the most killer gumbo, and it was haunted. So it was like a double dip. I'm walking around going, wow. Okay, haunted. Haunted. And I'm like wandering around, and the guy goes, well, your table's over here. I'm like, yeah. Well, I just want to go over here and look in that room real quick. So it's all fun. So, Keith, you have a new movie that just came out, Do What You Love. Why did you decide to create a movie?
I didn't. I had no involvement in the idea. My life was always will be just focused on doing those things that bring me joy, those things that I get a kick out of, regardless of what people think. I don't live my life externally by the influence of others, but being a musician and an author, and somehow my work got around to New York, and Blue Cast Productions in New York started following my work. I got a phone call one night saying, we're looking to do a movie on someone who is doing their thing, and you're doing the thing, and you were selected. And they said, we're going to come down to Memphis, and we're going to film for 2 weeks at no expense to you. And so they came down, and we filmed the project. We really didn't have a script, nor did we have anyone to participate. We just decided to let things unfold, and people started jumping on board, and the people who jumped on board were very, very spiritually knowledgeable. And it became very obvious, somewhat halfway, three-quarter way through, that the movie was to be called Do What You Love. I mean, we literally had no idea how this was going to unfold. And I know the guy, and I know that he's really qualified to put out an amazing product. But when it was all said and done and I saw the final version, I was very, very pleased. It described my life very, very well. There was no slants whatsoever. It held very true to who I am and what I'm about.
That's cool. Excuse me. I mean, I found it interesting and entertaining and informative, all packaged in a very well put together production. You know, I just kind of figured that it was you doing your thing, and so it's even better that the universe provided that for you at no cost. We like the no cost part.
And you know,
I like the no cost part.
At the first of the movie, well, actually, as the movie was going into final stages of production, the filmmaker, I came up with this idea. I said, Phil, why don't you consider being in the movie? No, I don't want to do that for vanity reasons. I said, but your point is the most important point, and you need to be placed at the very intro of the movie. And of course, this took him way far back because he used to live in Memphis, and he and I had a dialogue some years ago. And I said, bro, your life is, here now. It was his lack of decision that was holding him back from making a life choice. So he went to New York, trusted that everything was going to unfold, went to film school, and so he called me, and I explained to him the importance of him being in the movie at the intro sets up the whole movie because it's the do what you love process that goes full circle. He decided to jump off the cliff and go to school. He didn't know how everything was going to turn out. He went, and then he comes back to me, little did I know he was going to do that, to ask me to film a movie about my life, doing what you love. So I think it sets up the movie quite nicely to drive that point home that when you begin to live your passion, there is no obstacle big enough for the universe to move. Things just clear the way for you.
And I find that so true, that when you start listening, I mean, I feel like the universe is constantly bugging you, nagging you, I like that word better, to have you move forward. It's like, you need to go do this, you need to go do this. And when we finally listen and respond to those inner promptings that we're being given, what you're saying always happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you figure that God is love in its totality, when we begin to do what we love, we become in alignment with those energies. You become love. In fact, you become a vessel. You become a channel. So it makes sense to me. You become congruent with your passion, with your life purpose. If God is love, when you are born here for a purpose. And so obviously your purpose is love-driven. And so when you do what you love, then you become in alignment, and then prosperity by law, by natural response, just begins to happen all around you in ways you never could have imagined for your own self. And I've seen this repeatedly in my life.
And that's kind of where that leap of faith comes from, where you have to just trust, which is hard for a lot of us, to move forward in something that, from a mental perspective, may or may not happen.
Yes, and there's kind of like when I do interviews or presentations live, I go through this little list of questions or this little dialogue, if I may. My first question to the listening audience would be, are you doing what you love with your life? Now, some will raise their hand and jump up and down because they're so ecstatic, and they're affirming, yes, I am, yes, I am, yes, I am. And some will say, I sometimes do, and others will say, not at all. And so for those who dabble and for those who do not, my question is, why? Remember that your life is happening now. This is not a dress rehearsal. There are many people who claim they have a fear of death, and I believe that for most people it's not a fear of death. They actually fear not letting themselves live, and so the fear of death is actually a fear of regret that when life has come to its conclusion, that they have not actually allowed themselves to let go and live. And I always say, in this time that we're living in, it's very, very capital, very important to clear your issues with everything in your life, because the energy now on this planet is so high and it's exponentiating, and there can come a time, and will come a time in your life, that you wish you had cleared your problems, because we're being mirrored our, quote, selves. And there can come a day that you wish you had addressed your issues, because it can get so big and so monstrous that you may not actually be able to balance these energies, and you will find some excuse to check yourself off of this planet.
Well, and I think people that live their passion or do the things that they want, it makes me think of like that Bucket List movie. When you satisfy those needs and those desires, it's like you can check out feeling satisfied and content with the life that you've lived.
You look at one of your grandparents, an elderly person, a great-grandparent, a great aunt or uncle. You talk to them about their life, and at their age, they are so full, they're just ready at any time, actually. They don't have all this baggage. And, you were talking about faith. Some people, believe me, I understand practicality. Okay, I lived the life of a musician for many years and still do. So I understand the practical way. There were times in my life where I had the uh-oh syndrome, but I always trusted that things would pan out. It felt nerving at the time. It did. But I learned to let go. And some people are able to jump off that cliff that you had mentioned of faith from practicality, and they do it with absolute faith, and they do it gorgeously. And some people do it, and it turns out to be a complete disaster. But you have to understand that you cannot live your passion laced with fear, because that's not your passion. You have to be passionate about living your passion. And I can tell you all day how to do it. I can only show you the door, but you must be the one that has to open it.
G59 Sports Network in the chat room made a statement that I want to repeat because I thought it was pretty interesting. It fits right in with what we're saying. And they posted that leap shows who believes in themselves and are not afraid to fail. And I'm like, good insight. Because sometimes we do take that leap. One of the things that I like to say is that the universe will often put little tests and trials in our lives. We decide to take the leap, but then we hit some kind of an obstacle, or I like to call it a test, to see really how committed we are to moving forward with our desires. Have you experienced that or worked with people that have experienced those little challenges, especially when they're first taking, those baby steps forward?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point. Yes, because imagine you're living your life in a certain way. There's a certain group carved as your path. And you decide you're going to just change things a bit. And the first thing your mind says is, please don't come in here and start monkeying with me. And all the things that you've done in the past, even though you've made a shift, still have to come back around for resolution. And so because you're making this new change, this new endeavor, these older parts of yourself that are now dying off will come back and say, hi, do you remember me? And so it's important that you hold steadfastly to your new way. And just, like my filmmaker, you just have to go in there with passion. Don't worry about the details. That's the universe's job. But, yes, there can come some trials and some tests back to you just to see if you are absolutely committed and serious about moving in this way. And once you go through that process, which can be for most people an average amount of time depending on the person, once you go through that, the universe will just start pushing you in such a way. It's like you riding a raft and not even have to use the oars. The current will just push you nicely along.
And that's why I like using that word test versus obstacle, because then it's kind of like, oh, it's just a puzzle that I need to solve or a test that I need to complete. You don't even have to pass the test per se. I mean, you sort of have to pass it, but it's, and then things just open up. But if you look at it like, oh, these things are happening to me versus, oh, it's just a test. I can take a test. Tests are okay because I know that the result of the test is I'm going to move forward. And then it makes it less scary.
And then
change is scary.
It makes it easier to continue with all the things that are trying to distract you from moving forward. Absolutely. and see, passion is the fuel for creativity. And you never run out of fuel when you're doing what it is you're loving and loving what it is you're doing. It works in both directions. And it's my philosophy, it's my belief. In fact, I'm absolutely, I'll declare this, I'm absolutely sure of it, that if everyone does what they love, one would not come home from work all aggravated from being at a place they wish they weren't. They would come home peaceful and happy, and they would begin to spread that throughout the household, and peace would be the base for everyone in the household. Now imagine that this happens on a household level, then to a neighborhood level, a city level, a national level, a global level. Why peace could come to pass in a short amount of time, all by people just doing what they love.
Okay, but I'm going to throw out this. But what about jobs that nobody loves, like being the garbage collector, or, I can think of a whole litany of, like, really disgusting things, like that Dirty Job show, the person that cleans out septic tanks, I don't know anybody that would want to do that, would have a passion for doing that job.
That's funny you say that. I did a movie viewing last week, and some gentleman raised his hand at the end of the movie when I took Q&A, and he said, what about garbage collectors? And I understood his point. But I think when we make that kind of shift, the 100 monkey syndrome, when we all begin to shift to do that, I think our whole way of doing things will shift as well. Because taking care of your own self will become a part of the program of doing what you love. Your level of happiness is now on such a high vibrational level. Those jobs that we, quote, don't want to do, it's just part of all what we have to do to live on this earth. So it doesn't get directed to one particular person living his life in the rubbish.
Are there, I'm going to say, inner signs or experiences that someone can look for in their life or use, from a retrospective perspective to recognize if they've been living their passion or are in the flow?
Yes. When you have an idea of something that you think you would like to do for the rest of your life, take money out of the equation. If I made you a multi-millionaire right now, other than being lazy and going shopping, what would you do with your life? This is a great question for one to ask themselves. And when you begin to play with this question, your level of sincerity, no pun intended, passion behind that question is what will generate the response to you in such a way that you can no longer ignore or deny it. The path will unfold itself clearly. When you ask that juicy, delicious, sincere question, you will get more inner promptings, pushing you forward. But also on the opposite side of the spectrum, pain is a great catalyst being broke is a great catalyst. So I believe that we're always being prompted. I was in a relationship years ago. Someone I, quote, claimed to love, and it was a 10-year relationship, and it went bad. And all my happiness was focused on the outside. She was everything to me at that point. She was my transportation. She was my food. She was my shelter. She was my girlfriend. She was my sex. She was my friend. She was this and that. And when she decided to say, I'm done with this, there was nothing left for me. And at that place, I had nothing, and I chose, because I had nothing, I might as well have nothing and be happy. And it was a great motivation for me.
You said, think about what you want to do for the rest of your life. Does it have to be for the rest of your life?
No, for now, just until you make another conscious choice. It's all about being conscious. It's about being present. I consciously, deliberately choose to have this manifest / create in my life. Next week, I interviewed some kids on the movie. And, some want to be doctors, some want to be teachers, so forth and so on. They're kids. They may change their passion next week. They're not even in college yet. But we can always change what we want to do. But I strongly suggest that as you're transitioning from one passion into another, unless you really have your stuff together, you have your networking system, that you cross-fade the two to where you're able to make the transition seamlessly from one to the other.
I think we're going to come back and talk about that topic. But and the reason I asked this first question is that there are, in my belief, a lot of people that when they ask themselves that question and they think about the length of time that they would have to do something for the rest of their life, it's just too big. It's just too long. It's like, well, I don't want to do that for the next 40 years until I retire. And so it kind of stops them up.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Again, take it in, maybe you can quarter the rest of your life and say, it should be obvious to anyone. If I ask you the question, what would you do for now just because you can? If you were free and had no restraints, no restrictions, nothing stopping you, what would that be? Explore that. Move into that window. And as you do, as you live that life, you will be so in alignment with your true self, everything will naturally unfold. In fact, I believe that if you begin to live your present passion, because now you're vibrating at such a higher level than before because you were not, everything's going to come to you even more effortlessly and easily. So if you have any future passions, it's definitely by the universe's request that you follow it. So you have done all the work. So the work is really not you learning how to master your craft. In some cases, that may be. But it's more or less getting into alignment with who you are. And once you take on maybe, quote, your first passion, for now, you will fall into that alignment. And there can come a time where you become wealthy or whatever the scenario may be, that you no longer need to sweat, fret, or get.
Well, and sometimes, following your passion isn't really about the money. Sometimes it's about the work. Sometimes it's about the recognition. Whatever our personal payback is what we get out of following our passion.
Exactly. For me, wonderfully said, for me, it's truly knowing that something I've done has changed something in someone's life. That is the payoff for me. And it's not from an ego-driven point of view. It truly is a joy for me to be an instrument for someone. I grew up many years with a sister who had a neurological disorder, Friedreich's ataxia. And, her condition deteriorated over a period of years, and I saw her go from a wobble to walking with a walker to confined to a wheelchair and then passing away. And through all these years being in school with her, I saw people taught to criticize and tease her. And it broke me up. It tore me apart. And I realized this is not how you treat people. And her being my biggest teacher of compassion, more so than any spiritual deity, I knew that was the path I wanted / needed, had to walk. was to be a catalyst and an instrument for bringing bliss and joy into people's lives.
Kind of on the same topic, but a little shift. There are also some people that when you have this conversation, follow your passion, follow your dreams, there's this automatic thought, belief that it needs to be the spiritual path that you start following. Is that what you're saying? Or is it a much bigger and broader picture about whatever your passion could be?
Well, if you're doing what you love, and God is love, then when you do what you love, that is your spiritual path. I mean, you may want to open up a shop and do nails, pedicures, manicures, whatever it may be, because your passion is laced with all kind of spiritual information. I mean, your life just exponentially gets better. Your consciousness expands. Your energy elevates. People who no longer serve you, people who you can no longer help, they all leave your life, and then your life turns over, and a new wave of people come in, and it's just an influx of how you change what happens accordingly into your own life and for other people.
And so being, I'm going to say, an accountant could be someone's passion. Working with numbers and having that as being part of their lives could be them following their passion and their spiritual path. Absolutely. And a lot of people equate I'm living my passion because they make six figures. Don't get me wrong. 6 figures is a nice place to be. I don't want to on the high end, 6 figures especially.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But the question is, when you lay your head down at night thinking about that you're going to wake up tomorrow to repeat a certain process, a certain function, do you go to sleep with an or do you go to sleep with uh-oh? It's a very simple question, and only that person knows the answer. And, again, an accountant can be someone's absolute passion.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to throw out, some different examples of things people can be passionate about. I mean, I work as an intuitive. You've worked as a musician, and these are the things that people kind of, typically associate with following your passion. Things that are, one, you're self-employed, and they're those things that you can't, go on monster.com and go find a job doing, and so they're like, oh, well, they're living their passion, versus things that are more in a more traditional work environment kind of thing.
Yes.
If that
living
makes
your
sense.
passion does somewhat imply that you are your own boss. And, in my experience, that somewhat seems to be the case. But, I have, playing music as I do, and I always at work, I ask people when I meet them basically 3 or 4 questions. The first question is, hello, what's your name? I just get off the stage and I see someone watching the band and really digging the music, and that gives me the opportunity. It's an open window for me just to walk up and sit down at your table and just begin a dialogue. First is, what is your name? What do you do? Do you like what you do? And depending on the answer, great, or why not? And the answer, if it's a why not, is always because of the money. And I have people say, I would love to be a musician, but I can't do it. I say, I'm sorry, but you're speaking to the wrong person, because my life is a testament to that. I've had people say, I would love to handle flowers, but I just can't do that. I say, well, you go argue with the florist down the street. So there are jobs out there, in what we know as commonplace, that if you have a passion, start off there. At least take on your passion as a hobby, and then the windows begin to open up. You can move, you can transition from practicality slowly but surely, if that is your pace, into learning your craft. And finally, I'm done with this, I'm going to open up my own shop, or I'm going to do that. But for me, living your passion is about freedom. That's the bottom line. It's about the freedom. Yes, the freedom can show up in the form of money. It can show up in the form of you being your own boss. It's passion. Passion doesn't mean just, I love what I do. It's the fire of your life. It's why we are born. It's to do what you love. I mean, I don't think we were born to come down here and go to a 9-to-5 grind just to come home and have an argument with our spouse and then pass this on to generation after generation. I think it's all about being in, quote, love.
With everything? You're just
Absolutely. That's when life gets really juicy and tasty. I mean, loving yourself, loving what you do, loving where you live, just love. It's so encompassing, and it's a big word. It's a very, very big word. And, you know, your spiritual life or your life is a 24/7 job for the rest of your life to move into a realm of bliss. Yes, some people make shifts in a moment. For example, like Eckhart Tolle. I mean, this man made a shift on some level. He was ready and he shifted. And for other people, we have to monitor our thoughts day in and day out. We have 30-plus thousand thoughts, 60,000 thoughts a day. And trying to monitor all this can be an arduous task. So the best way we can do that is by monitoring how we feel. And how we feel throughout our day tells you if you are in alignment with passion.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes. When you go throughout your day, if you find yourself deviating from a feel-good space, find a reason to get back into feel-good space by pulling out a picture of someone you love, putting on a piece of music that truly moves you. Whatever the reason that you use to get back into feel-good mode will put you back in alignment, because understand that your thoughts are like a radio. The radio stations, God would be the radio, and the radio literally does not care what you do with it. It has knobs for you to turn, and it allows you to do so without judgment. So you find the station you want, you go through the dial, and you say, I choose that station right there. And when you do that, what we're doing at that point is we're actually choosing form. We're choosing detail. We're choosing how we want our creation to show up, because I'm choosing that station. So feeling would be compared to the volume. And how much volume you turn up will determine how fast, how loud that song or your manifestation will show up in your life. So when you go throughout your day and you find yourself beginning to not feel good, you, in the recent past of that day, have been choosing thoughts that are pulling you out of your bliss. You may not be aware of those thoughts, but they are. And so the trick is to get back into that space of alignment and passion is to find a reason to do so. Because if you try to create your life when you're not feeling blissful, you're actually creating the opposite result of what it is you're really wanting to manifest for yourself. And you work, and there's not enough work that can be had to create that which you're wanting. But the closer you get to alignment with bliss, passion, the well-being source of the universe, the least effort that has to be done.
Because it just flows.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're bringing in some principles from, law of attraction type concepts.
Very much so.
Discussion.
Very much so.
So if you're projecting negative thoughts, then you're just going to attract nasty, yucky stuff to yourself. You'll self-sabotage.
Yes. When I was a child, I had a fear of big dogs. I don't know why, but I had a fear of big dogs. And we probably have all experienced this. You walk into a room, you don't know there's a dog. There's 5 or 6 other people there. And if you have a fear of dogs, everybody there is having a good time with this big dog. And you walk in and you get that big knot in your throat and boom. And, first thing you have is a thought, dog. Second thing you have is a judgment, big dog hurt me. Next thing you have is this feeling, and the dog begins to respond to the experience. And so your fear, not only is it going to come back around to you next week, next month, next year, in the moment that you are afraid, that is the reality.
Well, and I think you bring up another interesting point, using this dog as an example. they say that dogs can sense our fear, but they sense our energy. And if our energy is in a place of fear, that's what they're picking up.
Yes. And the dog is truly not making a decision to do this. He's not like, well, this guy's freaking me out, so I'm just going to go bite him. They're just responding to the moment. They're in the moment. So if we look at everything outside of ourselves, if God is omnipresent, present in all places at all times, as Webster would say, it is the dog. It is your lover. It is your job. It is everything. And it's constantly mirroring to you your now moment. So the trick is to get into that now moment all the way, dive headfirst and submerge yourself into bliss. And I know that can be tough for a lot of people, and it can be a task for myself still to this day. But it's the wanting, it's the desire, it's the passion to just dwell there. And you may dwell there for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And you may slip for 5, 10, 15 minutes. But your conscious awareness of always being in that place will close the gap. And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until there is no more gap. Until you are consistently living in bliss. And, of course, you no longer have thoughts or fear. So it's a task. It's the rest of your life. It's wanting to elevate yourself to such a place that you are passionate in itself, and your life will manifest and mirror that to you as well.
When we find our energy going into that negative place, have you found that the individual is experiencing, and I'm going to use a phrase like a reoccurring trigger, that if they really stop and think about what took them from being happy and in the moment to this other place, that there might be, a handful of things that, when looked at very objectively, occur in their life and create this reaction in them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a habit. I think it's doubt. I find myself, even till this day, being successful in doing what I'm doing, I find those thoughts of doubt coming in, trying to distract me, seeing the miracles and the manifestations I have seen in my life. Truly, I've had things manifest by a thought. I have a thought, a desire, and I turn around literally in a matter of seconds. Bam, it's not only is it there, it's bigger than I could have ever possibly have dreamed if I wanted to manifest this deliberately. Because I had nothing in the way. It was just a thought, and I let it go and entertained it. But I think for a lot of people it's habit. We live our whole lives out of habit. There's a groove carved in our psyche. A lot of it could be engrams and so forth and so on. And so as I share with a lot of people when I do work, when these thoughts come, best thing that you can do when you want to do serious work on yourself, intensive, extensive spiritual work, call it spiritual, that's just the word I'm using, work on yourself. When you've had enough, when you have had enough, find a time, a day, a place, and make it a ceremony for yourself, for no one other than your highest, best life, your highest good. And light a candle, create a special place, whatever it is that you feel sacred with. I suggest maybe some light music with no lyrics, or at least in a foreign language so you're not distracted and pulled externally. And sit there and make yourself comfortable. Loosen up any restrictive clothing, take off any jewelry, shake yourself loose, go into the breathing pattern, just breathe yourself, taste your breath, feel how good it is to breathe. Taste your breath with appreciation, exhale all that worry, meditation. But what I'm saying is, call up all those things that you wish you would never see again. Bring them up. Invite them into your life. Bring them in. Keith, are you serious? Yeah, I'm very, very serious. And let them overwhelm you. And when you find yourself balanced in that illusion, you will not begin to imagine how much you have dissipated from your life. You can cut for example, let's say your issues in your life are a tree, an old rotten tree that is in your backyard. Yes, you can cut every branch, and eventually it will be gone. Or you can pull out a chainsaw and just whack it at the bottom. Same idea. But go inside and bring these fears up and find yourself in them. Okay, you way through them is what I strongly suggest. That's how I live my life. I'm the dive off the high diving board kind of guy into my pain and dissipate this so I can move forward, yes.
What about, like, a buddy system? You know, not that you want to become dependent on someone else, but perhaps having someone to talk to, someone to reflect back to you. You're walking around and you're like, wah, 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 you know, and but you have your buddy that walks up to you, and, you know, I mean, I like having, you know, I call safe words, and, you know, and they just come over and they go, you know, are you in the now? Which is, you know, the phrase for you to just kind of, you know, take a moment to reflect on where you are so that it can help you recognize, one, you're not in a good place, and give you the opportunity to bring yourself back into the moment.
Fantastic.
Have you ever tried that?
I have a few friends of mine that we do that with each other. And yes, and it's amazingly helpful because often when someone will say, tap me in the back and say, hey, buddy, where are you at inside? And I will see how unconscious that in that moment that I truly was. And it will give me the opportunity to, as I suggested a moment ago, pull out that picture, listen to that song, think of someone I care about, or just check where I'm at inside and just make a new decision. I strongly suggest that. It's a beautiful idea. And I have friends of mine who can, believe me, they can see. They can see when I'm going unconscious into my folly and going back to a place that I'm trying to elevate from. And they will tap me on the back and say, bro, you're in the illusion. And I like the idea. I like them being that forthright with me because not only is it a buzzword for me, but when, as my friend, and I gave him permission to do so, it really puts me in check, and it hits me in such a way that, you know, if you're standing next to a river and I'm complaining I have a fear of water, these are the type of friends that will grab me and just throw me in the river and say, get over it.
You know, and that's one of the reasons why I like having, you know, a safe word or a safe phrase or something, because then you know that the person is saying that to you out of love and not out of judgment, you know, because you've agreed, you know, that when this is said, that's what they're meaning, as opposed to, well, what's going on with you, you know, where you can take it because you're in that bad place as being attacked by the
Absolutely.
other person.
It changes the outcome for sure. It changes your outcome for sure, because if someone comes with, you know, an agenda of judgment, it's pretty common that we just want to take it as an attack and go into defense mode. And, of course, you know, some people who are endowed enough spiritually have done work on themselves. It can redirect that in a moment's notice. And, of course, there are some people who just cannot. And then it exacerbates a situation that we never wished that we were involved in the first place.
Amen.
You're being so stupid. Oh, well, thanks a lot.
Expletive. Come on, you have to finish that.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right up.
Yeah, I mean, I really like, you know, having friends that you can do that with, you know, and feeling safe that they're making this observation about you, which might not be that becoming.
You know, and I've even experienced, Dr. Rita, years being in public, and I've had and still do the most amazing opportunity to meet and reach a lot of people. And when I say reach a lot of people, I mean they're touching me back by all means, and they're giving me lessons continually. But I've seen being able to connect with such a person and creating that dialogue. And I'm fortunate to say that I've been gifted with the opportunity to reach people and have them open up and trust me in a very, very short amount of time. You know, second, third time I meet them, they're just telling me their issues. Or when they talk with me, they're actually focused. They're looking at me in my eyes and looking intensely. And I would watch as after I would leave, it would be a different reaction with other people. And so I don't take that sacred space for granted. I don't. When I look at people and I give them that touch, that reassurance, like that safe word you were saying, I'm able to do that just by a touch or on the shoulder and squeezing their shoulder in a certain way as saying, nice job of support, or I can squeeze them in a certain way without using words so they don't go in defensive mode to realize that I'm saying, hey, you know, you're out of pocket right now. But I've just been fortunate to have the opportunity. I've seen, Dr. Rita, I've seen that when I network with people, that when I truly look at them from a reverent, sacred, namaste kind of space and humble myself, I literally see God step out from deep within them to the front. And I can see the whole body contort. I can see the face change. The dialogue changes. I see them choking up and getting tearful. They don't even know why, because that's not what the conversation's about. I've seen it heal people on this in the moment.
But the other part is that you're, one, being receptive to their energy and not posing a threat to who they are, and so it gives them the opportunity to just be.
Yeah. And that's my passion in life, is to be the catalyst, and not only because the reward on the backside, which is to see them blissful, which is honestly somewhat a pat on the back, but the energy that moves through you, me, when we become that kind of instrument, is truly a ride.
Mm-hmm.
It's joy, it's bliss, it's expansion, it's purpose. It's why we're here. People often think, you know, be of service to God. God doesn't need your help, by no means. But I do believe it's very important that we have service to the people around us.
And one of the things that I have found in creating that space is that it can be a very big healing experience for the person that is in that dynamic with you, even if you're not intentionally doing any kind of healing or energy work, just by giving them permission. I mean, I like that term, of just being.
And, you know, I've actually, and that's very well put, because I've seen what you're describing here. I would be in a group of people, and myself or a couple other people would just be standing there, no dialogue, but somehow in the conversation, those people are saying things they would not normally say, because the presence of myself or the presence of someone else or is giving them that permission and that stability and the nerve and the, to use an expression, the balls, to actually be honest and say something, because they feel backed up and supported.
You know, I think it also helps that you're weird, I'm weird, you know, and so they can't obviously be any worse or weirder than us, so, you know, it's like,
no.
It's okay.
And, you know, I like being weird. I like being weird, you know, when I first got on this path, when I was awakened out of my sleep in 96 by that voice and wrote The Divine Principle. Look, everybody, and I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and I love the people here. I love my life here. But for many, many people around me, Keith has gone off the deep end. And I did. I went off the deep end. I loved every moment of it. But it's ironic that now in my life, those people who declared such a statement are some of my best friends now, and they're the people buying my work, buying The Divine Principle, buying the movie, buying my workbooks, da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's full circle. But, yeah, I can see how, you know, I live in the Bible Belt, for goodness sakes. Not out of, I'm not saying that out of judgment, I'm just saying that out of fact, that there is a consciousness here. And when something comes along and disturbs, quote, that consciousness, you will be let know about it. That's for sure.
worse than any karma kickback you could possibly get.
Yeah, and my intentions, your intentions, people who walk this or a particular path, are not to rattle the snake's nest. It's not. It's just being ourselves makes certain people, especially in a fundamental religious background, it makes them nervous. It makes them uncomfortable. And it's never, of course, my intentions.
But that's because you're just being you, and not, allowing the dogma to rule or trying to be. There are so many people that are so invested in being somebody that they're not, as opposed to just being themselves. And I think it's very difficult for them to let go of that facade of who they're supposed to be and just being who they are.
Yeah, and that was my path for me, my whole life up until the age of 28, when that long-term relationship dissolved. I was in a rock band. Look at Keith. He's cool. He wants to be a rock star. He wants to get a record contract. All of that. I was outside. I had the long hair. I was in a rock band. We had all the lights, and we would get up there and shake our stuff, and the songs that we wrote would reflect it. And I was externally focused. My whole world was the world of the temporal. And when that door shut, I had nothing. And I was focused on what people thought of me, my self-image, And it's a very, very tough path to live. And I strongly suggest to anyone out there, in this time that we're living in, and I always say this in my interviews, I strongly believe it, and there are many spiritualists who will back this statement up. The time we're living in, your life can swing either way. That's always been the case. But the window between thought and manifestation is depleting. So now is the perfect time to begin to manifest your desires. But if you are one who are living in the outside world, I strongly suggest that you refocus, redirect where you are looking for happiness.
In your example, and this is one of the questions I have, but I'm just going to use your example, you talked about what your life was like when you were younger, working as a musician, you still have the long hair, so that part hasn't really changed. But, it sounds like you were really coming from a place of ego versus soul. And how can people recognize the difference between the two? Because I think it can be extremely confusing.
It is confusing. And you know what, Doctor? It's actually still somewhat a challenge for me, because when that ego begins to ramble, and it happens to be something we want, boy, that sure does sound like soul promptings, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because we want it to come to a state of fruition. It doesn't mean, I'm not by any means saying that your desires in life come from an ego base. But you can tell by certain things. How bad do you want it? How fast do you want it to happen? What is it you're willing to do to get it? Basically, check yourself, and is it truly a want or a desire? And there is a vibrational difference between the two. Want implies I don't have, so therefore I need to get. That would be an ego-driven creation. A desire means I am so self-fulfilled that if this happens, this would be really okay energies. There is truly a difference. I would say monitor your motivation for wanting what it is, desiring what it is you're or choosing for yourself. It's not something I don't think anyone can tell you. It's something that you have to learn, to balance within yourself. And trial and error will show you by the results. Fear or love. Your life is either based on fear or love. There is not a neutral thought. And so ask yourself, is this something I really, really want because it's fulfilling and rewarding, because it feels like I'm congruent with this in my life? Or is this something I'm hoping that it gives me some sort of charge, be it temporary or permanent?
I mean, that's really kind of a hard one I think for a lot of people, because I think even if you're coming from ego, you can experience a certain amount of flow and forward movement, and I'm going to say a similar, although not the same experience of that movement through you.
Agreed. And I can sit here and tell you principles all day long. You can read my work. I'm sure you can read Dr. Rita's work and many of the books. But I truly believe it's for everyone to go in there and test it. You have to test drive yourself. I mean, I can sit here and tell you, I would think that most people in a moment's notice, if I ask you, if you give me a statement, and I ask you, is that statement coming from love or fear? I think everyone pretty much can say in that moment where it's coming from. But there are subtle energies at play. I mean, love and fear is not so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not so clear-cut. I mean, there are some gray energies there. There are definitely gray energies leaning towards the dark side, and there's some gray energies that are leaning towards the light side. So it's a matter of getting in there and figuring yourself out. I guess you can say that ego-driven would be, at whose expense are you willing to get what you're wanting?
What if, my husband was bringing this up last night, but I'm not going to use his example because it was nasty. What if what someone desires, their passion, is not something that we would see as being morally acceptable? I mean, there's a judgment, but then there's kind of this, like, as an example, and this is just kind of, I'm throwing this out, like Hitler, he was driven by something. Was he driven by ego, or was he being moved to live out some passion that he desired? And the examples that I had were nastier, but I'll just use that one.
It's very obvious to me that he was passionate about his agenda. Absolutely. I mean, look to what level he, in the arena that he played, and what he was willing to do. And he, as far as the history books go, he almost achieved that. But that's a big box of worms to open up. And since you opened it up, I'm gonna, are the people who killed Christ responsible for his death? Because if Christ was shown his whole life, this was going to happen. And these people in the township were passionate about getting him out. How are they accountable? I mean, that's the gray area for me. Passion to me is, I don't think it necessarily means I'm so driven that I'm going to achieve my goal. I'm using the word passion in the way that aligns with love, passion, the way that we often associate the word passion. Yes, being passionate will manifest what you are wanting to bring into existence, regardless. Absolutely agree.
So any comments to those people, I mean, hopefully not anybody listening to the show today, that might want to manifest things, or they have, these urges, or, I had this one guest, and he was like, well, this will, using this equipment will compel you to make changes. And I'm like, I don't like compel. But what if they feel compelled to do something that society looks at as being bad? As an example, at one point in time, tattoos were looked upon as being, the dregs of society would go there, and get themselves tattooed. And I can think of things that are even worse, but what if you're compelled and are being led and driven to do these things that, how do you...
Well, my answer, and I can use that example in my own life. My mom said, Keith, I know you want to play music. Go get a job. I couldn't. There's no way. It was literally impossible that I did not live out this path. And if anyone out there has such a drive or being pushed that there is literally, it's actually impossible that you cannot do, I would say if it does not hurt anyone, don't give a crap what anyone else thinks. because your life, your time on this planet now has nothing to do with anyone but you. And so if we live our life, that would be an ego base. As you mentioned earlier, that would be an ego-driven response. If what I do is influenced or detoured by what someone on the outside of me says, oh, for God's sakes, you can miss your whole life from looking for approval. Because there will be people who will never approve of something that you are passionate about, something that you are meant to do, something you are meant to say. So if someone is against what you stand for or what you want to do with your life, provided that you're not hurting anyone, I say go for it.
Okay, and I think that's a pretty good demarcation. The commercial music is going to be coming up. Oh, there it is. So we need to take a quick break. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Keith Blanchard. His webpage is Do What You Love, the movie, or the designprinciple.us, or the Yano Center of Light. And we'll be back with Keith after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.